especially racial profiling, but we have to acknowledge that there are some that also help the communities and want to help them to get through the struggles and things like that. And that's why we have some people sitting here trying to, you know, help us with the issues. But my question is, we know that our communities as Sudanese or Somalians coming from, as you said, dictatorship, some governments, they have those kind of fears that are inside them when it comes to police or any person, someone in government. You know, even when you're sitting there, you're not carrying a gun, you don't carry a gun, but there will be a fear, or maybe he will do something, he will arrest us. So there are some kind of fears that our parents or our grandparents will carry on with them. So my question is, what things can we do, or the police or the government can do to help overcome those fears? And if there are things to do, are they being done, or would they be would they come about it? Yeah. And also, when they do come about it, or they are, can they have some kind of focus groups to actually help out those work with those communities to help, you know, decrease the crime rates? So the question is, the main problem is the actual fear that is within our communities. Can that be overcome?
All right, I'll take one more question. Yes.
My question is, what efforts is the government or the police making to actually address the wider society about multiculturalism and the need to accept people from diverse communities from diverse culture into the community? Is it part of the school curriculum? If it is not, why not?
Okay.
It's good. If the youth commit any crime, but the way police approach, especially African youth, when they commit the crime, is that the correct way of approaching them, or just dealing with them?
Okay. And then when we come back, we can not only get some of the questions being answered by members of the police here for those specific questions that need to be asked, and then we'll look broadly on how we start finding answers, because there are many questions. The answers are not easy. They wouldn't be solved. This problem wouldn't be solved tomorrow, but at least we can start a conversation to see where we go and how we can come together and build something from there. So we'll spend the first part of this forum talking about the issues. In the second part is, how do we go about trying to address these issues? We know these are complex issues. You know, they've got many ramifications, a lot of factors that go into these issues. We don't pretend that we're going to be able to find always the right answer or solve them, but at least as a community we can start from somewhere, and hopefully at the end of the conversation come up with, you know, we can even put together an action group that can, you know, continue to discuss these issues and liaise with other institutions and organizations to see what can be done about these issues. But before we go into the actual strategies and how we address the issues, I'm just going to give the opportunity to members of the police here to answer to some of the very specific questions that were asked, namely, so I'll invite you in front, please. There has been a few questions there regarding what has happened. I'll start with the first one, with the young boy that died, apparently in the city, a young Sudanese boy. Can you tell us more about that, if you know?
Look, I don't know a lot about it, so I can't comment to a great extent, other than the fact that I know that the coroner of Victoria will conduct an inquest into that, which is independent of Victoria Police. Evidence will go before the coroner, and ultimately the coroner will make a finding as to what was the cause of death and what led up to it.
Okay.
So I can't say any more about that because I sincerely don't know any more about it. But that is a standard practice in this country, in any state, is that the coroner would be independent and would make those findings for that very unfortunate incident. Look, on a really, what I see as a positive note, and I'm very empathetic to a lot of people in this room and to your community, because I was talking anecdotally before to some people. In the 1950s, my father came out here from overseas, from Italy, He's not Italian per se, but the name Forti is Italian. And he, for many years, was called a wog and a dago, and he was only be employed as a labourer, etc., etc. And that whole community came up through that. And they were always accused of carrying knives, and perhaps a lot of them did, because they felt threatened, I don't know, or perhaps they did come from a fiery background, as many Mediterraneans do. Equally then, you know, I saw in my time, in the 1970s and the 1980s, we had what was called the Asian invasion. And if anyone was here in Australia at that time would know that there was a lot of resentment to the Asian people migrating to Australia, and all of the nasty names that went with that. And then there was the Vietnamese refugees that followed on after that. And they were marginalised too and accused of lots of different things. The one good thing that's come out of all of this is over a period of time and assimilation, they're all just members of the community now. So if you're an Italian now, people, once upon a time, my grandfather said I would never eat that wog food. Now we love to go down to Lygon Street to some of the best restaurants in Australia and enjoy that cultural food. Previous generations, meat and 3 veg, that's all there is to it. So and in terms of trying to explain that this country, I suppose, has gone through these iterations of different groups over a period of time, has caused us a lot of problems. And it does unfortunately cause stereotyping. And that's a human phenomenon, which I was just talking to people about, which is really sad. And I just thought of it when I wrote a couple of notes down before, when people say, don't ever trust a car salesman, those of you who've been here for a while in Australia, don't ever trust a car salesman, they'll always sell you a lemon. And you would have also heard people say, don't ever trust politicians. Whereas why do we do that? Why do we stereotype people just by what they are, what their vocation is, or what their colour is, or whatever else? It makes no sense. In fact, many people would know, and you might say things about some Australian Caucasians you've met, but I would like to think that some of you will live next door to people and you've now created great friendships. And we've heard lots of stories of that, where people have said, you know, I live next door to a wog and he's my best mate, because the passage of time has brought that through. So the unfortunate side of stereotyping is difficult. And I don't want anyone to get, for all of us to be considered the same, and because of that. Just like police, you know, we've got 15,000 police, and some of them have got some very strange ideas, and some of them don't comply with our own set of values. But organisationally, I believe we're very strong like that. Organisationally and culturally in Australia, I think the majority of people have a very good set of values. And it's always these minority groups that cause the problems, not the groups in the people, but the minority in whatever the area it is, whether it be Caucasians or police or taxi drivers or car salesmen. You only need a couple to get a bad reputation, and it carries a long way, which is really, really sad. And I think the mature and the intelligent people understand that, and we can work through it. Unfortunately, we have to deal with the others.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've got 2 points to kind of raise. If we have gone through many transition of discrimination between different cultures, why haven't we learned? Why haven't we tried to actually change those mistakes and move forward? Why do we have to go through those negatives for so many years to kind of say, you know what, we're going to give people a chance and we're going to accept them? This occurs because people fear different cultures. People don't understand cultures. People need to understand, you know, migrants and refugees need to be educated in Australian way of life and culture for a longer period of time. But I think as well, the police and the wider community need to also be educated and be aware that this is a new culture that's coming in. They've gone through so many different factors, and now they're here. They're going through a transition.
Have we learned, because we've gone through these stages, the Italians, the Vietnamese, we probably should have learned from that, and there's some degree we've learned, but because there's a stereotype that comes from the community, yeah. And there's also, when the issues come from the institutions or the people's representatives. Burhan spoke about Kevin Andrews' comment, for instance, as a minister. That has a much wider, influence, impact, and then the stereotype you get in the streets. And then if the police, the second in charge of the police, says things that are perceived to be, negative or stereotyping, that has a whole lot of consequences. Have we learned from that?
Well, look, I think we have learned, but I think one of the fundamental problems is we're human beings and we're frail in that area. And human beings for hundreds of generations and thousands of years have been fighting each other over religion and colour of skin and what country you come from. And of course, luckily now in the 21st century, we're miles ahead of where we have been in the past. But are we there? Probably not, probably never will be. But as I said before, I like to think, being a member of the Australian community, that 99% of the population completely accept other cultures, completely enjoy other cultures. You get sick of meat 3 veg every day, don't you? Like, I'm on a serious note, we have had so many countries come into Australia and bring so much richness with them, but there's always going to be those people that don't want that. There's always that small percentage. Equally, no matter what race, religion or whatever, also brings with it its small problems. So what I think, it's easy for me to sit here philosophically and say, all of us in this room are intelligent people who can rationalise and think things through, but there is, and this is what I talk about education before, about the benefit of it, regardless of whether it's academia or anything else. Because people who don't have the ability to do that often divert to violence, to bigotry and to all other things because they can't understand it. And that's the human frailty, I think. And yes, I think we have come a very, very long way. You only go back 40 years in this country, and if you weren't a white Anglo-Saxon, you were right on the outer.
All right, thank you.
And I'd like to say thank you for organising this event, and thank you for, I think this dialogue is extremely important. I guess one of the questions that needs to be raised today, the person who it's directed at, or the people it's directed at, are not actually in this room, and that would be the Age newspaper, perhaps the author of this article. And I think my question to them would be, would we ever see on the front page of the newspaper an article about young African Australians as victims of crime, of the crime of discrimination, of the crime of racism, and of being stopped on the street by police, and some work that Flemington Kensington Community Centre has done about that is quite informative and quite important. And we're not likely to see that on the front page of a newspaper at any time soon, as far as I can tell. And I think you are right in that a lot of people in this country are very accepting of diversity, but I think when these sorts of news articles are on the front of a newspaper with no balance given to the broader context, that's fuel to the fire of those people who will not accept diversity and who do have that prejudice. And this is not something you can really answer to. The people who need to answer that question are not in this room, unfortunately. But I think
and I'm not here to bash up the media, but media is driven by profit. Profit is driven by sales. They don't want the good news stories and the boring stories. We tell our police at every event we go to, there is a person from the media just waiting to see you do something wrong so that it's a headline story. Even if it's an honest mistake, they still want to capitalise on it. It happens to us as much as anyone else. But that's the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
All right, I'll make a quick comment, and then we need to go into trying to look at the solutions, because we can spend a whole day here talking of the issues and all that. We need to look into that in just a moment.
My question is, yes, as we see a very good police members here. They are there because to help us to understand the situation. But like you said, sir, there is a few in the community or in the police force who do the bad thing, who are the bad apple of your community, your organization. Did anybody had any responsibility, took any accountability, and we knew about that damage they done, and you guys expelled him, or being punished, or being sent to jail, or being expelled from their work? I have never seen anyone, as far as I know, for a long time.
For any reason?
We go through the OPI, Ethical Standard Division. All we hear is under investigation, or there is no substantial evidence to prosecute this man. Now, to prosecute that person, or if that police member did any damage, we have to take him to civil court. To get him to civil court, we don't have money to do that. So end of the day, even if you take him to civil court, having a lot of community support, he would come like an agent, not another police. Victoria Police never take responsibility. He come an agent. So to go an agent, let's say he don't have money, even though he found guilty or whatever that person did. So this is what we need to know. Yes, there is a bad apple, we can't help it. We can't help it like we don't help as well if the criminal in our community. Never happened. That's what we really want to know. We help each other to show that there is wrong on our side, there is wrong on the other side as well.
What I need to clarify is that, because you did talk about the stereotype and all of that, we know it is all bad. But if we treat police, the Victorian police, as an agent of, that makes sure that everybody in the community live safely, and not an agent that show that this community is bad over the other community. Because the Victorian police is multicultural. It's met a lot of people from different backgrounds. Why is this in the Victorian police coming up and comments? Although the article is written, why do police officers have to comment on something that will divide the community?
Because we would hold those data holdings on a multitude of different communities, gender. I mean, that's the nature of statistics. We would have just any amount that you'd like. By postcodes, by occupation, age, all of these things, race, religion, etc. So that's the point that I was making before, and that's why we need to do that, because we wouldn't be able to create multicultural liaison officers in a certain area if we didn't have that information, we didn't know there was a need for it. This is unfortunate that it's come out like that. If we had, for example, I'll give a simple example. You see in the paper quite regularly, how much is your house worth in a suburb? And they list all the suburbs and the average values. Okay, we could do that for every community, 140 countries or whatever is represented in Australia, but we don't like to do that either. And that's what I said before. Deputy Commissioner Cartwright made that call, and he's acknowledged it wasn't a good one, because he said, if I don't release it, I'm going to be criticised by other groups for trying to hide it, and they will get it through FOI, through Freedom of Information. So he said, I think, well, we may as well be transparent. Now, if someone went and said, give us the figures on Anglo-Saxons, or give us the figures on, well, any other group, Southern European, we've got that data too. But that's not what was called for.
Thanks very much.
The comment which has been released in media by the Edge, it was regarding my son. I am the father of the deceased, and we have had repeatedly, just meeting with the Victorian Police and with other African communities. And the reason the Edge has specified, let me tell you one thing. When my son passed away, there were plenty young Africans who would like to go for the strike, because no one was ready to hear their voices. No one was trying to tackle what kind of problem they have, and really it was a concern. But as a mature people, as a community leaders, as part of the society, we love this country. This is one thing that the wider community has to have, that kind of attitude. We love this country. This country is the one who risked us and provided us the protection to come to here. And this beautiful country, we don't want to see it, just it's damaged. We believe that we are part of the society. And such kind of negativity in between few part of the society and the Victorian Police, it has to be eliminated, such kind of negativity, Even though I don't have any attitude that all the Victorian Police has got, just all the negativity or corrupt attitude, but there are few.
Right. Yes, there are issues. Actually, before I do that, I think they wanted you to answer the question with regards to what is specifically being done. It looks like not much is being done when members of the police make a mistake. That they actually either get some sort of discipline, that they are disciplined, or suffer some sort of consequence, and that shows to the community. that yes, indeed, there are some accountability mechanisms that they can trust, because the question of trust is very important. Can you
Yeah,
make
look, I can cover that quite quickly. There's two things that govern Victoria Police discipline in the state of Victoria. First is the full legislation of the state. So Victoria Police, first and foremost, are community members like everybody else. That's the first thing. Then what is unique to us is the Police Regulation Act, which is an act of parliament that's only specific to police. So there's numerous police have been through the court systems before juries, and I'm very sorry to say, although they perhaps deserve to be so, there's a number of police in jail, and there's been a number of police sent to jail over the years. Thankfully, very thankfully, it's a very small representation, and that is because we hope that we only get the right people with the right values into the organisation in the first place, and that's why our screening process is so rigorous. The next thing is our internal discipline system. So we have a discipline system very similar to the Army, if you like, and a lot of you might be familiar with that type of a regime. So we have other rules and regulations and the Chief Commissioner's instructions that we must comply with. So it's actually an offence for us to breach the Chief Commissioner's instructions. So if he says we have to wear a uniform, etc., and we don't, we can be charged with a discipline offence. Now that's not an offence that goes before a court, in the same sort of court. It's like a court-martial, if you like. The best example that most people would relate to is a court-martial system. And within that, there's a range of sanctions that can be placed on a member. Anything from fining them, demoting them, moving them to a different location, to sacking them out of the police force. And believe me, it mightn't be publicly known, but there's a lot of people sacked from Victoria Police for various breaches, and that's obviously the very serious ones, neglecting duty, and it would normally be over a long period of time, because we are also afforded the rights that everybody else is too, as to development and warnings and, was it an honest mistake, was it deliberate, and all those sorts of things that go with it to get warnings. So we're really no different to the rest of the workforce, and we have similar protections, but we've actually got that extra layer of discipline that nobody else has. So there is a mechanism there, yes, and it's not necessarily public, but any police member that goes before the open court, the media take a very keen interest in it.
All right, thanks very much for that. Now, to move forward, we're going to do two things. The first one is what are the issues here? After we've heard everyone talking, what are the main issues, the broad issues that need to be tackled? And then after that, how do we go about as a community to address them? The police trying to engage with many community members to address crime. However, in that engagement, there are gaps that needs to be filled. There are lessons that need to be learned, and there are ways that things need to be done to ensure that communities are not being stigmatized or victimized inappropriately or unnecessarily, whilst the issue of crime is being addressed, because we all want to live in a society where there's as less crime as possible. That's given. I think linked to crime, there are issues of employment, disadvantage, from young people that come here. That's just one example that I'm giving, but I want the rest of the forum here to not ask questions anymore, but identify the issues here so that we can then go into how we go about solving them. Apart from crime that I've mentioned here, which started this whole thing with the statistics, what are the other issues? Yes, please.
For me as a person, I feel there's the issue of there's issue of understanding. There's lack of understanding between the African community and then also maybe the wider community about the true nature of who we are or what we do. We have lots of myths that are being spread out there, and actually they're very powerful myths. One of them is being the whole idea that because you come from a country like Somalia or like Sudan, where there's been a lot of civil unrest, you are very, very likely to actually commit crime. That is a myth. Nobody has done any research to prove that. and to ask the forum, for example, I would ask anyone who has anyone been in a refugee camp here, or has anyone been through war? Anyone, how many times have you been to jail for committing crime? The truth remains that there are myths out there that we keep perpetuating. We keep pushing out, and that's actually creating images of people that are not representative.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So we've got communication, understanding, perception, and attitude. It goes into all of that. Yes?
I think one thing, the premise for me is to recognize the level of disadvantage,
Yes.
the level of marginalization within the African community. I think that is where we should start.
Okay.
There is huge, actually we are going to a very entrenched poverty as we go. And if this trend is allowed, if this trend continues to go, would be the second community in Australia next to the indigenous population who would have a very entrenched poverty, disadvantage, multiple marginalization as well.
Okay.
So the question for us is how do we go as a community to address this? These are very fundamental questions.
Okay, we'll get to that. Yeah.